I think Prabhupada only visited that temple one time. And one thing that when I joined, I was already married. I had a husband who was Yuga Dharma. And I had a daughter, and her name was Crystal. But when we joined the temple, and there were so many devotees around, she said, please call me Yashoda. So we changed her name and called her Yashoda. She was just Yashoda after that. And then I had another daughter, Amrita, while we were still in Laguna Beach. And so Laguna Beach was very small, and there wasn't a lot of facility for people to live in the temple. And we were householders already and taking care of ourselves like that, so we always lived outside of the temple and had our own home. And we were in Laguna Beach, we were in Berkeley, we were in Seattle for a while. Then we went back to Los Angeles, and then when they opened the school up in Three Rivers, Bhaktivedanta Village, we moved up there so that our children could have association. And by that time I had two more sons, Ananda Shakti and my youngest Sham Sundar. So Yuga Dharma. Yuga Dharma Das. Some of you might know him because at the end of his life he became very ill, and he ended up coming to Vrindavan. And because we were dear Bhakti and Vijay, Bhakti Siddhanta and Vijay were very dear friends of ours, and so Yuga Dharma got to go on the altar and serve Radhisham Sundar as a pujari, which was the climax of his life. He was so ecstatic with that. He left his body 6 years ago. So I'm still in Three Rivers, and my children are around me. And I just was going to share one thing, because being, and my service, people say, well, what was your service? And my service was, I was a mother, full-time mother, and served my husband, who was demanding, and if you knew Yoga Dharma, he was everything. So he was, and I served him for 36 years, till death do we part. So, you know, it was everything. And in the end, I missed him terribly. I never thought I would miss him, because sometimes I was so glad when he would come to India, and then I would be by myself. But then I would, you know, I missed him. And when he left his body, I missed him terribly. It was like about 3 years. The first year was so intense. I cried all the time. And in the end, I realized everything we went through together, because we went through so much, was just some kind of karmic activity that we had to work out. And then I was happy for that. Even the bad stuff, the good stuff, the bad stuff, all of it. It just, and sometimes when I think of him, I'll probably talk about him a lot, but I just say to myself, remember the bad times, remember the bad times. And I can't anymore. I just remember the good things. And he used to say, I'm your spiritual master. And I'd say, no, you're not. But actually, he was my spiritual master in a sense. He was the connection. You know, he actually met Prabhupada, talked to Prabhupada, got some instructions from him. He went to Bhubaneswar, and he had ideas of things he wanted to do. And finally, he asked Prabhupada, well, could he be a Murtiwala? And he said, yes, that's a great idea. And so we had money, and he came back to Laguna Beach, and he opened a gift shop. It was called Govinda's. It was on Coast Highway. And he had Gornitai and some Jagannath deities, and he sold those, and he sold devotee paraphernalia. And I think that was for about 3 years we had that store. So actually, he was my connection to know what was going on in ISKCON, because I was pretty much just taking care of children. But when Prabhupada came to Laguna Beach, because I had babies, I was considered Muchi and couldn't really do anything. And I wanted to be Suchi. And so they said, well, you can make this pillow. Okay? So it was a very simple pillow. And actually, there's a picture of Prabhupada sitting in the Laguna Beach temple. It's in one of the Bhagavad Gitas. It's a red and gold striped pillow. And it's a very simple project, which if I had to do it today would take me a half an hour. But to work on that pillow, first I had to put the children to sleep in the afternoon, and then I would go shower, and then I'd go put on a clean sari, and then I would sew until they would wake up. And it took me days to just make that pillow. But that was wonderful. And when I see the picture, I'm like, oh, I made that pillow, you know. Anyway, Prabhupada came to Laguna Beach, and
what's the color of that pillow?
Red and gold, striped. Actually, in Bhagavati, who lives in Three Rivers, I don't know if any of you know her, she made the bolsters, because she was an expert seamstress. I have one of the bolsters now. not the pillow, but I actually have 2 of the bolsters, so as prasadam. So that's very sweet. Anyway, Prabhupada came to Laguna Beach Temple, and he was going to give class, and it was upstairs. And downstairs in kind of a basement was one householder couple lived down there, and the radio or the intercom system played, so you go downstairs and listen. So after Guru Puja, and he was getting ready to give class, I think my babies or children, they were like 3 and 1, were downstairs probably sleeping. And so I went outside the temple and started to walk downstairs, and it was all windows. So Prabhupada could actually see me walking out of class and going downstairs. And he went, like, come in. And I was like, I can't come in. I have babies downstairs, I wanted to go in, but I didn't want to bring them up. I was so afraid they would disturb everyone, and I didn't want to do that. So one other thing, my husband was very enthusiastic for Prabhupada. I remember one time when he came to Los Angeles, and he was driving to the airport, and we had a Land Cruiser, and my husband said, quick, get in the car. And so we got in the car, and he was like racing down the freeway, to be next to the car by Prabhupada so we could wave at him. You feel so embarrassed about how you behave, but in the end, it's typical, I guess. The other thing I did get to do was when Prabhupada gave out cookies, because I had 2 children, I could go up with my children, and that was you're very close to Prabhupada then. And I can remember waiting in line. One would be like, and other Matajis would say to me, can I take your child up? And I would say, no. Because that's the only moment I was going to have, was to take him up to get a cookie. But going up there, I would first I'd be thinking, what if my child doesn't take a cookie? How embarrassing would that be? And now realizing what child is not going to take a cookie anyway. And then the other thing I felt was when I would get up there, I would be so nervous and just like shaking inside, vibrating inside, and thinking to myself, I'm so embarrassed of this body I'm in, Prabhupada. I feel so embarrassed about it. Forgive me. That's how, I just couldn't help it. And then you would get your cookie, and everybody wanted a piece of it. I didn't mind sharing parts of the cookie, but that little moment was, I guess, those few little things have kept me in the movement. I guess it's been since 75. I was married 36 years plus 6, 42 years of just no matter what, I can't give it up. I can't give it up, and all my faith is in Prabhupada. When I first saw him, I saw him in the LA temple. We had just come, my husband's brother was John Akarishi, and we were living in the mountains. He said, I've met the spiritual master, you must come and see him. And we were trying to find some kind of spiritual knowledge in our nonsense. And so we went, and I remember Prabhupada I was sitting way in the back of the temple. It was the temple room that is now there. And Prabhupada walked in to greet the deities. And I remember the first time I saw him from so far away, he was like the moon, he was illuminating. And the thing I thought when I saw him, it felt like he saw me, but I knew I saw him, and I said to myself, he's doing it. What I'm looking for, he's doing it, and whatever he says, I'm going to do it. It was like, it's sort of like I remember, it's like giving a promise. And to me, like, promises are really important. Honesty and promises, 2 things I really valued always. And so I sort of promised myself that Prabhupada asked me to do very few simple things. Follow the 4 regular principles and chant japa. And there were years when I did not chant because I ended up being a school teacher and working, and I tried to chant, but the hours didn't exist for me to work and take care of my kids. And as soon as I retired, which was 5 years ago, I said, now I can get back to chanting my japa. And it's been wonderful. So it hasn't been, it's been up and down in every way. but it's been my way, and it's been good because I feel connected. I feel like Prabhupada cares about me, and that he's there for me, and I want to be what he asked me to be. So that's it. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. My name is Sukada Devi, and I'd like to thank everybody that I've met on our trip here to Vrindavan. Wonderful friends. At least I consider you friends. You're just really wonderful, wonderful devotees. I joined the temple in Boston. The first time I ever came to the temple was the 1st September in 1970. And I was only 17, and I was too young to move into the temple, and my parents were not in favor of this strange new thing. It was sort of like a cult or something. There was a lot of strange things happening at that time, 1970, and the teenagers and young people were doing strange things. And so when I got involved with the Krishnas, they were very concerned and very worried for me. So they said I couldn't come and go to the temple, but I would go to the temple. I lived about 45 minutes south of Boston, and I would go up on the weekends, and then I would go to school during the week. And eventually I started skipping school and going to the temple also, which caused quite a few problems, not only with my parents, but with the school and everything. So the school started doing this detention thing with me. So after I did my classes, I had to stay after and stay longer at school to make up all the time that I was missing by going to the temple. But as soon as I finished my year, my last year in high school, and I had turned 18, then I moved into the temple, and that was in probably about May of '71. Now Srila Prabhupada came to Boston. We were expecting Srila Prabhupada to come to Boston he actually came in towards the end of July, but he was expected, I think it was started in April, he was expected, but his schedule kept changing, so he didn't come until July. And we also, when I first started coming to the Boston temple, there was a lot of devotees there, because if you know the history back then, ISKCON Press was in the Boston temple, and then they planned to move down to New York, and then that winter, the winter of '70-'71, they started moving down to the New York temple. And when they left, there was only a handful of very new devotees. All the more senior devotees left with the press, and the only ones left at the temple was Satsrupa Maharaj. He wasn't a Maharaj then, but Satsrupa, and then there was about 12 of us or so, and we were all uninitiated. He was about the only one that was initiated. A few months later, a couple more initiated people came, but Boston ended up to be a small temple when I finally moved in. And when Prabhupada came in that summer of '71, I really thought it was going to be a very intimate thing, that we're just a small temple, so we'll get so much nice time with Srila Prabhupada. I was wrong, because when Srila Prabhupada came anywhere, devotees came from all over. So the temple was really packed. And we had, we met Srila Prabhupada at the airport, and at that time you could go right to the gate to meet him. And we all filled into the airport to meet Srila Prabhupada, and he sat down and he had a little prasadam, and you know, he talked to us for a little while, and then we walked back. And there is a picture I have, and I'm next to Srila Prabhupada. And at the time, the women, we did not wear like nice saris. We just wore cloth, just from a bolt of cloth. You probably have seen these pictures of us back then. We looked rather silly now that, you know, we know what, you know, nice saris we have now. But back then it was just, you know, if you were not married, you had saffron. And if you were married, at that time you had yellow. So there is this picture of me standing next to Srila Prabhupada. And also because the women had to cover their head. So I'm in this sari that's just like a brahmachari kind of cloth. And I have my head covered. And I have a pin that keeps it on my head like this. And so there's this picture of me next to Srila Prabhupada, just kind of gazing at Srila Prabhupada. I think it's in a couple of books, that particular picture. But we had, they had set up a room for Srila Prabhupada at a very nice hotel at that time when he arrived in Boston. He came first to the temple and he gave a little lecture, and he saw the small deities that were there, because when he came at that time, he came to do the installation of larger deities, and he came to do initiations also. But after he gave the short class, Satsrupa said they were ready to take him to his room. It's at the hotel. And Prabhupada was like, you know, what do you mean? Why I'm not staying here? I'm not staying here with the devotees. And the temple was like an old house. Actually, it was before the devotees got it. It was a mortuary, you know, mortuary. So anyway, it was old. We really didn't think it was a nice place for Srila Prabhupada. So we had a really, really nice place for him. But he wouldn't leave. He wanted to be there. So there was some scrambling going on to get a room set up for him, move brahmacharis out, and set up a nice room for Prabhupada there at the temple. And so during this time now, I started going into the kitchen, and I was helping prepare. There were so many devotees. I was helping prepare cooking, and Srila Prabhupada installed the deities, and he was doing initiations. And when Srila Prabhupada left, Satsrupa came down to the kitchen. And he said to me, oh, what name did Srila Prabhupada give you? And I said, well, I've been down here for 3 days. I didn't go up and get initiated. Nobody told me that they were having initiations. I've been down here for 3 days. And he goes, what do you mean? You were supposed to go get initiated. I said, well, but I didn't know. I didn't know, well, I'm just down here, you know. And he said, whoa, you're supposed to get initiated. So he said, I'm going to send, there was this devotee, Harinama. He said, I'm going to send Harinama after Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada went down to New York from Boston. He says, I'm going to send him down right away with your beads so that Srila Prabhupada will chant on your beads and, you know, you'll get initiated. So Satsrupa Maharaj, he wrote this letter to Srila Prabhupada describing me a little bit, and I actually still have that letter. Well, last year I gave it to the archives, the original letter that Satsrupa had written. But in the letter he had said, this girl, she is 18 years old, and it's okay now that she's in the temple. There was trouble with her parents, but it's all right, and she's been chanting 16 rounds and attending the morning and evening programs, and, you know, she'd like to, you know, asking if you could chant on her beads and initiate her. And on that same letter, Srila Prabhupada wrote, Sukada Devi, one who gives pleasure to Krishna. So So I had that letter, and then later he wrote to me another letter describing my name and thanking me for the dakshin that I had sent to him, and just saying that if you have any questions, approach senior god brothers and god sisters, and always chant 16 rounds like that. So so that's kind of the story of my initiation. And then so I was in Boston for quite a while, and then in late 72 or early 73, I went to Pittsburgh. And in Pittsburgh, I met my husband, or anyway, we got married. We didn't really know each other. It was those kind of arranged marriage type thing. And we were married in 1973. We had a fire sacrifice in New Vrindavan. And yes, we're still married. And his name is Mahendra Das. So, I don't know, what is that, like 41 years. So we've learned, you have to, yeah, so we have 4 children and 8 grandchildren. So, and we have a very nice family. And we also live in the area where Shrisha lives. We went up there when the Bhaktivedanta Village School was up there. Our children were in the school. And then when the school closed, we also stayed in that area along with a lot of other, they're Prabhupada devotees. So there's quite a few devotees still in that area. And we have programs and kirtans. Let's see. We from Pittsburgh, we were in Philadelphia for a while, and actually we saw Srila Prabhupada came to New Vrindavan. We saw him a couple of times in New Vrindavan, and then we moved to Philadelphia.
What happened when you saw him in New Vrindavan?
Well, I had a little girl at that time, and so you know, when you have children, you're kind of pushed back. You were always pretty much pushed back because a lot of enthusiastic brahmacharis, brahmacharinis, and sannyasis around, and so it's pretty hard to compete with that. My husband got quite a bit of association. He was temple president in Pittsburgh, so he got to have a lot of association with Prabhupada down there. So,
Some of his stories.
what?
You have some of his stories?
Those are his stories, I don't, you know. My husband was from the group that came from Hawaii, what Manjari's talking about with Siddha Swarup, and he was one of those devotees that came from that group. And when he left Hawaii, when that group got split up to different temples, he went to New York. Yes, he went to New York, and he was only there a day or two, and Bhavananda said he wanted him to be the temple commander. And my husband said he looked at him and said, well, what's that? What's a temple commander? And he said, oh, just tell everybody what to do. And he was like, so he was the temple commander there. But from Pittsburgh, we were in Philadelphia, and then that was in 1975.
But I have to say that Mahendra is one of those people, that by his
Give
natural...
the microphone.
You should come over there. You should come easier. I just have to say that Mahendra, her husband, is one of those people who by his natural good qualities and character, he sort of rises to the top in any situation. And so it's not surprising that as soon as he arrived, that Bhavananda, who was a good manager himself, would have recognized that and made him, then he became the president.
I'll try to go quickly, just a little bit quicker, so that Manjawali can talk, because she has nice things. Anyway, from there we went to Philadelphia, because Mahendra was supposed to take over as temple president there, because Rabindra Swarup had wanted to go back to school and he didn't want to be temple president at the time. So we were sent there to Philadelphia, and then Srila Prabhupada came that summer of '75 to Philadelphia, and that, again, I had a little girl, so I didn't have that much association really. Once you're a mother and everything, it's not a lot. There's not much personal association. Just seeing Srila Prabhupada, everyone will probably tell you the same thing. You always felt that his glance was just for you, that he would just look at you and you could feel it was a special glance. It was just something for you. And so that's what we had. We had those special glances. And of course, what Shrisha was talking about, cookies. Yeah, cookies are always there, and that was one of the blessings of being a mother. And even at that time, during cookie time, it's amazing how many fathers really wanted to hold their children. Bring those kids up there. Amazing. But also, another thing about having children early on is that everybody went to the morning program, and everybody went to Mangal Arati, and that included mothers and children. And we all brought our children wrapped in blankets, and we just laid them on the floor during Mangal Arati. Our children are older, those older children, and those children are mostly in their 30s and 40s now. They all went to Mangal Arati for years and years and years. They went to Mangal Arati. Yeah.
And
yeah.
Siddha Arti.
Yeah, and evening Arti and everything. Yeah. Well, so when we were in Philadelphia, and Rabindra Swarup changed his mind that he didn't want to give up his job as the president there. So Mahendra wasn't quite sure what his service was going to be at that point, but he ended up coming to India here to the Mayapur festival, where it was discussed where he should go. And so when he came back, he said, well, they want me to go to either Los Angeles and help Rameshwara with the BBT, or go to France and help Bhagavan. And I said, well, I know where I wanted to go. I wanted to go to Los Angeles, because it was a householder community, and I had children, and I thought that would be a nicer place for me. And it ended up to be a wonderful place. And Mahendra had great service with the BBT for years, many, many years with the BBT. And he also was arranging the flights for devotees early on when they would come to India. He would arrange to get the planes from Air India, and all the devotees would call him, and he'd get all the tickets. And for every 10 tickets that the devotees bought, Mahendra would get a free ticket. But then he'd give the free tickets to sannyasis or whoever, temple presidents or something. He'd give those free tickets away. But he was doing that for a number of years. So we ended up in Los Angeles. And like I said about Mangal Artik and the children, in Los Angeles with so many householders and so many children, maybe you probably have never been to Los Angeles temple, but that temple was lined in the early morning all around with sleeping children wrapped in blankets. And in the evening, for Artik in the evening, all the householders would dress up their children. And really fancy, it was always a fancy thing, evening Artik. And everybody went to the morning program, and everybody went to the evening program, because that's what Srila Prabhupada wanted. Did your service all day, and then in the evening you would do the evening program. It's just something was natural for us. That's how we were trained up early on. So that's what we did. And then we ended up going up to Three Rivers. So I'm going to end now because the time is getting short and I want Manjuali to talk. Thank you so much.
Speaking, yes. Hare Krishna, Glories to Srila Prabhupada. My name is Manjuali Devi Jasi, and I feel very honored to share a few little stories with you today. My memory is not as good as it was, 40 years plus, so please excuse me if I get any of the facts wrong, and they don't really are a little change from Yadavara's tapes, but I'll try my best. I came to Srila Prabhupada in the end of 1971. I met the devotees in 1970, and Dinabandhu actually deposited me in New Dwarka. I was visiting temples along the west coast of America, Los Angeles. Oh, and I had never gone to Los Angeles, but I would visit Dohnavir and Kamala and Portland and Bowadock in Seattle, and just kind of go down the coast, up and down on the road, looking for truth, looking for a reason to be on this planet, and looking for a spiritual master. And I visited Santa Barbara, and that's where Dinabandhu and Akuti were. And they said, Srila Prabhupada's coming to Los Angeles. We're taking you to Los Angeles to see the big deities. And so they just had little Jagannath. So we went to Los Angeles at the end of 1971. And I just immediately loved being with the devotees. And I was given the opportunity to sew for Rukmini Dwarkadish. And anyway, a few months later, Srila Prabhupada came, and it was really wonderful. The whole temple, Los Angeles at that time was the biggest temple in ISKCON. It had 75 devotees, and as a brahmacharini, we had one brahmacharini room, and there were 23 of us in one room. And you had to put your sleeping bag out. We all slept on sleeping bags on the floor, and we were allowed to have one milk crate of possessions. Everything else, so we came with a backpack, everything else went out, one milk crate. And we had to have our sleeping bags out before Aarti, otherwise you'd end up by the bathroom. So it was really amazing. But we were young and enthusiastic. Srila Prabhupada came he was coming for Gaur Purnima, and he was going to be staying in Los Angeles for a little while because he was doing translation work there, and that's where there was a facility for him to do that. And I remember the first time I met Srila Prabhupada, we were getting the temple room ready, and we were running about just making sure everything was ready, and we got the call, Prabhupada's just getting out of the car. And I remember just bowing my head down to the floor as he came in. And I remember meeting his feet first. And it was just something that's, on my mind, the feet of Prabhupada. And I just remember at that time just seeing there was a golden illuminating hue around his feet. And he just walked so stately, and I looked up to Prabhupada, and I could just see he looked like a giant. And he was, he was so noble and so just so graceful. And then he went and offered obeisances to the deities, and that was the beginning of my relationship with Srila Prabhupada in Los Angeles, was at that moment. A couple of other stories: when I got initiated on Nrsingadev's appearance day, which was a few months later in 1972, and yes, and he gave me the name Manjuali, and he looked at me and he said, Gopine. So, and he just looked in gopi name. Then on Balaram's appearance day in 72, I received second initiation. They needed a pujari. And so 3 months later, I got second initiation. And so, and then 2 months later, I got married. Or October the 1st, so maybe 3 months. So 72 was quite an important year for me. And my marriage was arranged to Jayatirtha, who was he was a temple president in Los Angeles. And Srila Prabhupada, our marriage was, I had 24 hours to accept or reject the proposal. And I sat up all night and I prayed to Srila Prabhupada. And I really felt that it would be good for my spiritual life. So the next morning I said I would get married to Jayatirtha. And there was some annoyance because it took me 24 hours. I didn't say yes immediately, but it was okay. And so then it was 7 days later we were married. So, and Srila Prabhupada said because some of the marriages weren't working out as they should, Prabhupada said we were to be married in the garden at Nandarani and Dayananda's house, instead of in the temple. So, and so we invited Srila Prabhupada to come to the wedding. And he wasn't feeling that good that day, and he was doing translation work. So he invited us to the garden after the wedding to come and meet him. And in Los Angeles, you remember, there's just a really delightful garden that every evening Srila Prabhupada would spend time in the garden meeting kind of dignitaries. The day we were there, Stilson Judah was there, who wrote a wonderful book, Hare Krishna and the Culture. And Bhakti Swarup Damodar would be there with Srila Prabhupada, and he was there that day discussing science and religion and where they meet. Anyway, after we got married, I had to make a kurta, a bead bag, and a feast. And I remember I rang my mother up to say I was getting married. She said, "Can I come?" And so I said, "Of course." We were totally in the bubble. We just didn't think that, we should invite our parents even for such a momentous, but we got a ticket for my mother to fly out, and she came out as well. Anyway, we went into the garden. At that time, Srila Prabhupada was speaking about marriage. He was speaking about family life. And he was also speaking that actually a beautiful wife was an enemy to the husband because she would distract him from his devotional life. And so this was the mood at the time. Though he appreciated beauty, but it was just one of the preachings from the Bhagavatam. Anyway, we were married. We walked into Prabhupada. We just entered the gateway into Prabhupada's garden. And Srila Prabhupada looked up and then looked at Jayatirtha. And I was in my pink sari. We managed a few gopi dots. This was the beginning of And Prabhupada looked up and he looked at Jayatirtha and he said, "Oh, she is beautiful." And I thought, oh my God, I'm an enemy already. But when Prabhupada said it, there was a humor. He just kind of winked almost, and he said it like, he was playing with us. He was just being a father to us. And then we came in and we brought the prasadam for him. And he wasn't eating, hadn't eaten, but he took the drink. And you know how Srila Prabhupada, when he would pick up the glass, his silver glass, he would pick it up and then his finger would be up, in the air, and he would just pour it in. And so he poured some, it was kheer with toasted almonds and elaichi, and a little bit of kesher, a little sun, and Prabhupada tasted it, and then he just kind of savored it for a minute, took another drink, and then he looked at Jai Tirth and he said, "And she can cook." So I went, phew. Of course, it was just a pot of kheer, you know, but anyway, it was just Prabhupada's humor and his personal attention to us and his affection that really came through, and that was something that I carry with me to today. And then he had us sit right at his feet, right close by to him, you know, from closer than this table. And then he looked down and he said, "So what do your parents think of this Krishna consciousness?" You know, and I said my mother had come, and then I offered him my dakshina. My mother had given me $50 for my wedding, and I gave it to Srila Prabhupada as my offering to Prabhupada. And he just took the Lakshmi, the money, and then he was just very pleased, you know. I said, "Oh, my mother, I've told her about Krishna, and she chants Hare Krishna when she washes her dishes." That was her thing. She was Catholic, but she liked Krishna. She liked to chant, you know. So she said, "My time for meditation is washing the dishes." And there were 6 kids in the family, so there were a lot of dishes. But she and I told Srila Prabhupada, and he was just, you know, happy. And then he was speaking to some of the others. So that was that story. And I have another story, because, you know, as women, we didn't really get, after Mother Jamuna and Malati and Mandakini in the early days, I came just that little bit later. There were mostly men that were in the service, in the immediate circle around Srila Prabhupada. And it was just the way it was. We were happy just to do our service, you know, because we knew that just doing our service, we were pleasing Srila Prabhupada. And I became a pujari, and I would dress Rukmini Dwarkadish every day, and my husband was dressing the little deities. So, and there was, of course, a full deity program in Los Angeles. Shalavati had started, and, you know, so it was a really intense program, many artists, just like now, but it was, you know, there was a small team doing the work. And anyway, Srila Prabhupada was there. This was about 1974. Prabhupada came to see was visiting again, and he did all the Chaitanya Charitamritas in Los Angeles. So we were really, really fortunate that Srila Prabhupada spent a lot of time in New Dwarka, and we had a lot of personal classes. Another story is one day Srila Prabhupada came, and we were doing arti. In those days, women, and I think still women can, you know, the incense is burning and we're with the chamras, and Srila Prabhupada comes into the Govinda prayers. And Srila Prabhupada came in, and it was just, you'd open the doors to the altar and there would be your spiritual master. And it was just something, and then you just, you know, did your arti. And Srila Prabhupada would stand for a long time before each deity and really, really take in and commune with the divine. And it was a very serious and very intentional in the way he greeted Krishna. And we knew he could see Krishna. He was in communion, and he would feel he would be dialoguing with Krishna as well. Not just looking at the external, but actually meeting the divine, Anyway, Srila Prabhupada, after arti, after class that particular day, I was cooking breakfast. We were on the marathon, and Shruti Kirti, I think it was, came down and said, Srila Prabhupada wants to see you immediately.
in the middle of breakfast. I thought, oh my God, what have I done wrong? There's something, And he said, no, Srila Prabhupada, just take off your apron. So I took my apron off and I ran up to Srila Prabhupada's quarters in Los Angeles. It was upstairs. And I entered the room, and the walls were blue, and the curtains were kind of a saffron yellow color. And Prabhupada told us that this was the color of his room when he was a boy. We asked him what color to paint the room, and he said blue walls and kind of a saffron peach curtains. So anyway, we walked into his room, and his asana and his desk, there was a window behind it, and the sun was pouring in on Srila Prabhupada. He was sitting.
Photos are up there.
You're right.
Above you, there's a picture of us.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh.
And the sun's coming through.
And the sun coming in.
Everything.
You remember that day of
I
the
still live there.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And the sun was pouring in behind Srila Prabhupada, and he was like luminous again, absolutely golden, and and he was sitting there, and just in gamsha or in a dhoti, but nothing on the top, and just tilak and Brahman thread. And I came in and offered my obeisances and looked up at him, and he had a massive smile. And he was smiling, and he said, who dressed the deities? Rukmini Dorgatish, or Radha Krishna, we were calling them then. And I said, I did, Srila Prabhupada. Very timidly, thinking, oh no, something is askew. And he said, and he was just silent for a minute, and he said, very nice. Krishna's looking beautiful, very nice. Thank you very much. And I thought, it's nothing to do with me. No, don't do that. It's nothing to do with me. It's just we actually asked to be vehicles for service. We ask for service. And our Guruji works through us. So and Srila Prabhupada, and then he said, Krishna is smiling so much. And then he said, thank you very much again. And then he said that always remember Krishna, always serve Krishna, and this life will be perfect, and the next will be perfect, and you'll go back to Godhead. And I took this not as my own personal message from Srila Prabhupada, but a message for all of us, that actually if we follow the process, if we serve Krishna, if we remember Krishna, if we remember Krishna's name, then this life is perfect, and the next will be perfect, and we have a gateway, an entrance to the divine, to to go back to Godhead. And this was Srila Prabhupada's, gift at the moment. And then he motioned to Shruti to get his little purse, and where it was a little bag that had ties around it, and he asked Shruti Kirti to bring him his purse. And then Srila Prabhupada dipped his hand into his purse, looked through, and took out $20 and handed it to me for Krishna. And he did this again to teach us dakshina, to give to the Lord. And I said to him, I was so excited, I said, oh, Srila Prabhupada will use this for the next outfit. Janmashtami was coming. And it was just like, and Prabhupada just said, thank you very much, teach others to do as you do. So it was just like whatever we learned from Srila Prabhupada, we learned from Jamuna Devi and from the other devotees that have taught us to do, we share, we share it with others. And I remember just offering my obeisances and going down, and my heart was pounding, and I had this $20 that Srila Prabhupada gave me for Krishna Seva, for the deity worship. And so that is another story from New Dwarka. And let me see, another story. I only have a few stories, but this one is Srila Prabhupada in 1976. Srila Prabhupada sent Jai Tirtha and myself to Bhaktivedanta Manor in London, or England. And Jai Tirtha was to head up the program there. And we arrived, I had a baby on the 8th of March. My husband came back 1 month later and said, we're moving in 2 weeks to Los Angeles. So when my son Vaishnava, Vishwambar, was 6 weeks old, we moved to London, Bhaktivedanta Manor, and Prabhupada said, I'm coming in 3 months. So it was April, May, June, 2 months actually, he came in June. So we had 2 months, and it was very austere at that time in Bhaktivedanta Manor, and so a group of people came together and did a massive collection, and we actually redecorated the whole temple, and we formed a women's Sankirtan party that was very successful, and Prabhupada came to Los Angeles, and he was very happy with all the devotees' enthusiasm and the decor as well. He was happy with the way things were, and many guests came to see Srila Prabhupada, and among those guests was George Harrison. George Harrison, Prabhupada had much affection for George, and George came one day to join Srila Prabhupada for lunch. And this day was, Prabhupada was not very well. He had a cold. So he was entertaining in his bedroom at Bhaktivedanta Manor. Now, Bhaktivedanta Manor, it has a suite of rooms. I don't know if any of you have been there, but it was Srila Prabhupada's manor house. Marble bathrooms, and the darshan room is at least twice or 3 times the size of this room. So it's a really big, wonderful room that overlooks a garden, a 17-acre garden at that time, much larger than that now. And anyway, George came to join Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada said he would entertain him in his bedroom. And Prabhupada was sitting on his bed, and he had all white quilts and pillows. So Prabhupada, when we went in the room to set up for prasadam, because he was going to serve lunch prasadam in his bedroom it was big enough, but along one place. When George came in, Prabhupada insisted that George sit in his chair in the bedroom, and that chair is still there. And George said, no, I want to sit on the floor. And Prabhupada said, no, you must sit on the chair. And Prabhupada, when he was sitting on his bed, he looked like he was riding a white swan, because it was just all white. And he was just golden on this white swan. It was the most gorgeous picture. And Prabhupada asked us to make lunch for George, and so there was a team of us, and we served. And Brahmananda was there, and my husband Jai Tirtha Vishnuvirya, and there was a whole group of men that were served along the window there. We moved Prabhupada's table over, and we served. And Prabhupada was discussing with George and with all of them just about the manor, and Prabhupada was so thankful to George for actually purchasing the manor in 1973. This was 76, of course, and he was sharing that. And then after we served the prasadam, Srila Prabhupada asked that samosas, tomato chutney, and nectar be made for George to take home for his family. Prabhupada, and this is another example of Prabhupada, always was a gentleman and always gracious in sending prasadam out. And George loved samosas and hot tomato chutney and strawberry nectar, which was like yogurt and cream and strawberries all blended together with a copious amount of sugar. And so it was sweet and yummy, and so that was a direct order from Srila Prabhupada to cook for George, and we made that, and Prabhupada, and then we cleaned up, but we didn't really get much about the conversation that was going on, but it was just wonderful to be in that association. And let me see, another story. Oh, this is just a short story. In 1977, Srila Prabhupada came to the manor, and this was 2 months before he left. And it was very challenging for all of us to see Srila Prabhupada in such a difficult and weak state. And he wasn't speaking, he had his dark glasses on, and Tamal was speaking. But I just remember we had the opportunity, and Srila Prabhupada was only drinking grape juice pretty much, and Shruti Rupa was doing, so I got a chance to help with that. And Srila Prabhupada, when he arrived, you know, he was just so soft, you know, at that time, and there were tears running from his eyes when he came to the manor. And he embraced my husband and said, "I have come to take shelter of this tirtha." And it was something that was, you know, we know how the story evolved, but there was something so poignant in Prabhupada, his affection for all of us, his disciples. And even in such a difficult situation, he was so gracious and so encouraging and so humble. And, you know, so that was just another thing. Another, one more story that involves here at 40 years.
What did Prabhupada say? I just came to take shelter
Of this tirtha, of Jaya Tirtha. And Jaya Tirtha was his name. I have come to take shelter of this tirtha. And there were tears in his eyes. So, and there's one other story, and this will be my last story. In 1974, Krishna and Balaram, at Janmashtami 1974, Krishna and Balaram were meant to be installed here at Krishna Balaram Temple. And Srila Prabhupada told my husband to bring me. And I told Dayananda to bring Nandarani as well. And this was I would never have been able to come to India, but Srila Prabhupada's order, you know, because he really, this was, Krishna Balaram Mandir was a really important temple, and this was, you know, Vrindavan. This was Prabhupada's place of real worship, and he was so enthusiastic in Los Angeles. We were all together in Los Angeles. He was so enthusiastic that Krishna Balaram were coming, and he had invited many dignitaries to come for that Janmashtami. We actually traveled with Srila Prabhupada. There was two cars. We were in the car with Pradyumna, and then Srila Prabhupada was with, in the other car with his secretary. I think Nitai was there, and I think it was Satsarup. And we traveled in a kind of caravan, you know, to the airport. And we were on 2 different flights because they couldn't get all the tickets on one flight. But we met Srila Prabhupada in Delhi. Our planes landed close to each other, and we went to the Todamol Lane, first Delhi temple, and it was a very tiny, Tejas and Madeira were there. It was a very tiny little 2 up and 2 down temple. Tejas' room, his office, became Srila Prabhupada's quarters. And it was probably the size of 2 mats. It was tiny. And Madeira and I were, it was an Ekadasi, we were cooking for Srila Prabhupada, and right next to the kitchen, it was 2 up, 2 down, right next to the kitchen was the room where Srila Prabhupada was staying. He had taken his shower, and the whole time we were cooking, Srila Prabhupada was singing. He was playing he was singing all the songs of Narottam Das Thakur and Vishwanath Chakravarti, and and Hare Krishna, and it was like absolutely, and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, of course, and it was like we were cooking for Srila Prabhupada, and we were being serenaded, and at the same time, Prabhupada was doing his bhajan. He had arrived in India, his motherland, and everything changed. He was relaxed when he was here. It was like the stress of the West, the passion of the West just absolutely melted away. And Srila Prabhupada was just doing his bhajan, playing his harmonium. And this was probably 2 hours we cooked. And Prabhupada just played the music. He had taken a shower and just played the music the whole time, and then we offered him as prasadam. After prasadam, we came in 2 cars to down the Roman Reti to Roman Reti. It was before it was named after Srila Prabhupada, the road. And I remember it wasn't very built up, and the sands were actually luminous. They were sparkling. You remember in the old days, the sands here, where this is Roman Reti, the sands, the sparkling sands. And we drove with Srila Prabhupada up to the site here. Prabhupada got out of the car. This was 40 years ago. This was August 1974. And Jamuna Devi and Gurudas and the devotees here, and Pishima was here, Srila Prabhupada's sister, and we met, and they met Srila Prabhupada, and they came into the quarters, and the quarters here, actually, this room, I don't remember this room, but I remember the other room, and the deities were in the back room where Prabhupada's kitchen was. They just had a cloth over them, and Krishna and Balaram were in there waiting to be installed. And Jamuna Devi took us in to see the deities before they were installed in Srila Prabhupada. But what happened is Srila Prabhupada realized really quickly that everything wasn't just right. The building wasn't finished. And there was much work to do. The cement, there was a problem with the cement, and Gurudas, the deity worship was pretty much together, the outfits, and but everything wasn't together, and Prabhupada was livid, angry, and I just dropped back because I wasn't in that room at that time, but everybody was quiet. There was no, all the joy of Prabhupada arriving, and this was absolutely cut. Because Prabhupada had an expectation that everything was going to be ready, and he had invited some really important dignitaries to really show Krishna consciousness as, a robust movement and an authoritative movement, and a ball dropped. And and so it took a few days for that all to land, and I remember it was just very quiet here, and tiptoes. It was a real tiptoe time. But within all that, there's my last story is Srila Prabhupada. We were, Jamuna Devi and Rukmini was here, and Pishima, Srila Prabhupada's sister, who many of you have probably seen her picture or met her. I'm sure Parvati met Pishima, and Kusha, of course, and Vivi. And Pishima didn't speak English, but she we were all cooking together for Srila Prabhupada his lunch in one tiny little room on the floor. And after Los Angeles cooking with a full set of cooking things, it was a bit of an adjustment, cutting vegetables on the floor. Anyway, one day we had everything happening. I was just like a sous chef helping out Kai. Srila Prabhupada appeared at the door of the kitchen, and he looked at all of us on the floor trying to make his preparations, and then he smiled, and all he said is, "Where is the old lady?" And he said it with such a cheeky grin you know, he was playing with his sister. Where is the old lady? And she had gone to the ladies, you know, she had gone to the, so he said, oh, she'll be right back, you know. So anyway, well, thank you for listening. That's my few of my stories. It's an honor to share Srila Prabhupada's stories. And we're over time.
Well, if you have more, you can continue.
Well, I think those are the most, I mean, there's a few other little things, you know, like running in to, after cleaning Srila Prabhupada's room in Los Angeles, running in to put the vases on the altar and having Prabhupada chanting Gayatri mantra there. And it's just kind of like you're a hair in front of the, you know, the headlights, and then Prabhupada just bows his head, giving you permission to drop the vases on the desk in front of him, and then you kind of pay your obeisances and back out of the room, you know. So there's a few stories like that, but mainly most of my service to Srila Prabhupada was in the background, and I don't have loads of stories, but those are just a few that I feel honored to share with you. And thank you. Hare Krishna.